You know, as a historical point, the liberals now love Alexander Hamilton. Why do they love Alexander Hamilton? Because they don't understand Alexander Hamilton, the first instance. But they love Alexander Hamilton because he and Jefferson were political opponents. As a matter of fact, they couldn't stand each other. And Hamilton was of the party, the Federalist Party of Adams. And Jefferson was taking on Adams, who was the president. Jefferson was the vice president. And Jefferson decided to run with Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr stabs Jefferson in the back. All this intrigue that took place. He decided, as the votes came in, that he would challenge Jefferson for president. The votes came into the House of Representatives. Adams was way behind. He wasn't going to win. And they had these constant votes in the House of Representatives between Burr and Jefferson. And even though Hamilton didn't like Jefferson, he hated Burr, and Burr hated him. And a couple of years later, of course, they would have this duel, and Burr would kill Hamilton. But Hamilton urged his supporters in the Federalist Party to go ahead ultimately and vote for Jefferson. But the left likes Jefferson because they think he was a big government, central government type. Now, he was more of a central government type than Jefferson. There's no question about that. And he believed in a national treasury, and he believed in the national bank, and he believed in a national currency and those things, which he's credited for helping build the American economy. Doesn't mean you favor a central government for all purposes. He was somewhat skeptical of the constitutional system that had been developed, but he was supportive of it. He argued for it. Remember I told you a story that he had printed 500 copies of the Federalist Papers. Now, the Federalist Papers were essays written under pseudonyms, as you know, those who supported it, John Jay, Madison, and Hamilton. But he put them together in a collection and had a bound copy made, 500 of them, 50 of which went to Virginia, which was leaning against ratification. The rest are used in New York, which was leaning against ratification. And Massachusetts was leaning against ratification. And so he wanted to use this as a way to persuade people to support the Constitution. But the progressives always need somebody to history to pervert, either to attack them or to create a straw man or something. So they like Hamilton. They hate Jefferson. And I just wanted to remind the left, including those who purport to be reporters, of Federalist number 84. Among other things, Hamilton opposed a Bill of Rights. Not because he opposed rights. He said it was unnecessary. The Constitution doesn't say anything about free speech and doesn't say anything about religious liberty and all these other things, so it doesn't have the power to get involved in any of those things. But there was a contrary argument that, no, we needed a Bill of Rights to lay out specific areas where the federal government could not stomp on the individual or the states. And the retort to that was, well, if we lay out 10 areas or 12 areas or originally 17 areas, maybe there's an 18th or a 19th we haven't thought of. But in any event, the ratification in the states was unlikely until the proponents of the Constitution agreed that there needed to be amendments, which they called the Bill of Rights. They weren't sure how many. They had an idea what kind. And ultimately, New York, Massachusetts, and Virginia supported it. But it wasn't without a battle. Some of these votes were close, including in Virginia. You had in Virginia, Patrick Henry opposed it. James Monroe, who would actually become president, he opposed it. George Mason himself, who was at the Constitutional Convention, he opposed it for a number of reasons, including he opposed slavery, even though he owned some slaves, and he wanted a Bill of Rights. And he and George Washington had been good friends. They didn't live that far from each other, but Washington was furious with them. And their friendship was never the same again. And keep in mind, George Mason also wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which preceded the Declaration of Independence by about 5 weeks. And Jefferson borrowed from him as well as Locke, and he borrowed from Locke too. But anyway, notice they don't celebrate Madison on the left. They don't celebrate Jefferson. They don't celebrate Mason. It's Hamilton, because they think Hamilton is their guy. Well, I want to read something to them, writing as Publius, near the end of that particular Federalist essay, when it comes to the press. Freedom of the press, do we need an amendment, and so forth and so on. Here's what Hamilton wrote. On the subject of the liberty of the press, as much as has been said, I cannot forbear adding a remark or two. In the first place, he writes, I observe there's not a syllable concerning it in the Constitution of this state, meaning New York. In the next, I contend that whatever has been said about it in that or any other state amounts to nothing. What signifies a declaration that, quote, the liberty of the press shall be inviolably preserved, unquote? What is the liberty of the press? Who can give it any definition which would not leave the utmost latitude for evasion? I hold it to be impracticable, and from this I infer that its security, whatever fine declarations may be inserted in any constitution respecting it, must altogether depend on public opinion and on the general spirit of the people and of the government. And here, after all, as is intimated upon another occasion, must we seek for the only solid basis of our rights. Now, in this, all the founders agreed, to one extent or another. Jefferson felt quite strongly when he ran for president that the Alien and Sedition Act, sedition being an attack on free speech and freedom of the press, passed by the Federalists under Adams and supported by Hamilton quietly, Jefferson wanted to do away with it, and he campaigned on that, among other things, and he did away with it when he and his party won. But there's language in here that the media just do not get because they do not understand history. They don't care. Hamilton says that freedom of the press depends on the opinion of the public. And what he means by that, and what Jefferson means by that, and the rest of them is, these institutions that they put in place, or would put in place, are only as good as the people support them. In the end. Look what the media are doing to themselves. Look what the media are doing to themselves. They are undermining the public's support for their institution because they are, as a group, with exceptions, unprofessional, ideological, and deceitful. And not because I say so, you see it and you hear it too. And not because we're conservatives, but because this day in, day out campaign against this president, against his family, against those who voted for him, against his policies, day in, day out, day in, day out, have exposed the media for being a propagandist operation. Now, they're free to do it, but they're undermining their whatever credibility they have, and they're certainly demonstrating themselves to be utterly unprofessional.